right now.
Tonight, President Donald Trump continues to make strides towards fulfilling his campaign promises.
Since taking office more than a week ago, he's now taken several actions focusing on transgender people. One executive order defines sex in federal matters as only male or female, while not recognizing transgender, non-binary, or intersex people, or the idea that gender can be fluid.
Another order bans transgender military members. Trump enacted this ban before in 2017, but President Biden later repealed it in 2021.
A third order cuts federal support for gender transitions for anyone under the age of 19. It also directs that federally run insurance programs exclude coverage for such medical care. The order states that the U.S. will not fund, sponsor, promote, assist, or support the so-called transition of a child from one sex to another, and it will rigorously enforce all laws that prohibit or limit these destructive and life-altering procedures. It argues that kids are too impressionable to make this kind of decision, so it is one they will later regret and cannot reverse. Today, our Julie Dunmeyer spoke to several trans advocates who argue against this narrative.
Today, I spoke with members and allies of the trans community in Grand Rapids. They explained gender-affirming care and how they feel targeted under the Trump administration.
It feels very heavy, although we knew this was coming.
It's dangerous.
It's hard. It's really scary.
It's disturbing.
Members and allies of the trans community are concerned.
The name of the executive order is inflammatory on purpose. It's a scare tactic meant to rile up a lot of feelings in the country.
This comes after the executive order titled, quote, "Protecting Children from Chemical and Surgical Mutilation" was signed.
It's a gross mischaracterization of what gender-affirming care is for children.
Take it from Roz Keith, a parent of a trans son and founder of the nonprofit Stand With Trans. Roz explains young children, like, for example, a 5-year-old, would only ever undergo something like social changes.
There are no medical changes that are going to happen at that age. Once a child hits perhaps 10, 11, 12, if they have been insistent, persistent, and consistent with that gender declaration, then probably what comes next is a consultation with a pediatric endocrinologist. The endocrinologist prescribes hormones, but you don't walk into the doctor's office and get a prescription.
Ollie Robison, a trans employee from the Grand Rapids Pride Center, calls these times dark.
I think that we're just in for a lot more.
And Erin Brevka, a trans woman who just celebrated officially changing their name, worries what the future holds.
It has been extremely distressing. I know that even though I am fortunate at the moment being a trans woman, like an adult trans woman, this isn't directly hurting me, but I've been there. I know what it's like to be a queer child who doesn't understand themselves, let alone what's going on around them.
This order centering around children is cause for pause with all of the adults Fox 17 spoke with.
We see a large percentage of depression and suicidality in youth already, largely due to societal transphobia. And taking away care will result in premature, preventable deaths of kids.
All saying this appears to only be the beginning, but hope is not lost.
This story will be on the internet. People will see this. So many people get upset or annoyed that the trans experience keeps getting shoved in their face, or that we're being loud, and if we just quieted down, they wouldn't be bothered by us so much. But I feel like most trans people, including myself, also kind of want that. Like, I don't want to constantly be talking to people about my gender or my story or what it means to be a transgender person, but I can't not keep having this conversation if my rights are going to keep being threatened like this.
Julie Dunmeyer, Fox 17 News.
As Julie's story mentioned, gender-affirming care for youth isn't always medical in nature. So what does it look like? First, there's an evaluation and diagnosis. That often happens with a pediatrician and or a mental health specialist. Some trans youth may decide to start with a social transition that involves a new hairstyle, clothing, name, or pronouns. Medical care can include puberty blockers, which are reversible and also give someone time to explore their gender identity. Older teens may later take hormones to make their bodies more closely match their gender identity. Well beyond that can be some kind of gender-affirming surgery, but the Grand Rapids Trans Foundation tells us that surgeries are very rare in trans youth. Gender affirming care is supported by medical groups such as the American Medical Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Today, we also reached out to several Republican lawmakers from both the state and federal levels to get their reactions. We spent a few minutes with State Representative Brad Paquette from the 37th District, which includes portions of Berrien and Cass counties in southwest Michigan. He says he supports the president's order and for the last few years has been looking at how this is handled in Michigan. He says pharmaceutical and surgical intervention is what the president is trying to stop.
And so hopefully there will be enough people standing out saying that this is harming children, because these are the most vulnerable individuals among us, and they're becoming pharmaceutical customers for life. And no child should have to be thankful that they were able to grow up without hand of intervention and be able to grow through puberty. No child should be thankful that they were able to go through puberty without hand of intervention. And this is what's happening in our state right now, and it needs to end.
We also received a statement from the Republican Congressman Tim Walberg, who represents Michigan's 5th Congressional District in southwest Michigan. It reads, many children and teens go through challenging, awkward, and uncertain times as they grow up. Permanent, life-altering decisions made during these times can lead to immense regret. That's why we have laws in place to prevent children from making many permanent decisions that they are not capable of fully consenting to. Regardless of one's thoughts on the topic, it should be common sense that taxpayers are not funding gender transitions for minors.
A controversial decision made by the NT's health minister to remove pride flags from the foyers of top-end hospitals has community members now up in arms.
We should be about being all Australian, all inclusive, all the time.
And it's alleged the Torres Strait Islander flag was also missing for a period of time.
It's beyond comprehension. It's to see that, and just as a sudden move, it's ridiculous. It's outrageous.
It is believed the flags were removed on Tuesday from the Royal Darwin and Palmerston hospitals following a complaint made by a member of the public to the NT Chief Minister's office. Health professionals telling 9 News they were shocked, not notified, and it was an awful and disgusting move. Meanwhile, Health Minister Steve Edgington has defended the decision, claiming the long-standing Northern Territory government protocol is to fly the Australian Northern Territory and Aboriginal flags. All NT health facilities are required to comply with this protocol, and it was recently identified that some flag displays at hospitals were not compliant. Consequently, these displays have been amended. This comes despite the Territory Government's 5-year Gender Equality Action Plan from 2022 to 2025, which labels the hospital flags as being supportive of gender inclusivity.
The CLP are prioritising removing flags, especially when it represents our diversity. We have other priorities in the Northern Territory. I think he should stand down if that's his priority.
The decision also comes only days after the Queensland Government announced an immediate pause on puberty-blocking hormone treatment for transgender children and teenagers. Today, the Torres Strait Islander flag appeared to have returned to the foyer of the Royal Darwin Hospital, but it's unclear if or when the pride flags will be reinstated.
Breaking news, Facebook parent company Meta agrees to pay President Trump $25 million as a result of his lawsuit over account suspension. Meta suspended Trump's accounts following the Capitol attack in 2021. It has since reversed its fact-checking and suspension policies.
Senator Van Hollen says when the Trump administration issued that memo freezing federal grants and loans on Monday, the short-term goal was to take back funds already approved by Congress. But he says he's concerned the long-term goal is tied to Project 2025.
And right here, you've got President Trump essentially trying to seize the power of the purse for himself, and it's hurting lots of people across the country, hurting lots of communities across the country.
Maryland U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen says after Congress passed the recent funding bill in bipartisan fashion, the Trump administration's memo on Monday was an attempt to cherry pick which programs would and would not receive funding. You've called this action an illegal abuse of power. Why?
Presidents are not kings, and the reason we have checks and balances in our Constitution is to make sure that we have that shared power.
But while that was the short-term goal, Senator Van Hollen says he worries the true goal is to overturn the 1974 Impoundment Control Act, which stymied actions by then-President Richard Nixon and reaffirmed Congress's power of the purse. Why does he think that? because of who Trump nominated to lead the White House Office of Management and Budget, Russ Vought. Senator Van Hollen asking Vought this question at his recent confirmation hearing.
Will you comply with the Impoundment Control Act?
Senator, the president ran against the Impoundment Control Act.
I asked him directly whether or not he and the Trump administration would comply with the law, the Impoundment Control Act, and he refused to answer that question. And now we know why.
Senator Van Hollen says he plans to vote against Vaught's confirmation because of that, and because he was one of the authors of Project 2025, which, if implemented, would dramatically overhaul the federal government.
The White House issued a clarification saying that their intent with this was to target foreign aid and DEI initiatives. What's your reaction to that?
This goes way beyond those initiatives. I mean, the reason we're hearing from firefighters and small businesses and veterans organizations is because the scope of this order is extremely broad.
Maryland Republican Congressman Andy Harris's office acknowledged receiving our request for an interview or statement about this yesterday. We have not heard back since. Live in the newsroom.
Right now, Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley is working across the aisle demanding President Trump provide more information as to why he fired 18 inspectors general. Grassley is the Senate Judiciary Chairman. He and ranking member Democrat Dick Durbin sent a letter to the president today. Inspectors general are nonpartisan watchdogs that work to find and stop fraud and abuse in government. The president is required by law to provide Congress at least 30 days notice before taking action. The two senators say Congress did not receive that notice. The letter says in part, while IGs aren't immune from removal, the law must be followed. The communication to Congress must contain more than vague statements. It must include sufficient facts to assure Congress and the public that termination is due to real concerns. This is a matter of public and congressional accountability and ensuring the public's confidence in the Inspector General community. Grassley and Durbin are also calling on President Trump to quickly nominate qualified and nonpartisan individuals.
President Donald Trump's budget office has apparently rescinded a memo freezing spending on federal grants. It did so less than 2 days after it sparked widespread confusion and legal challenges across the country. Trump administration officials saying the funding pause was necessary to review whether spending aligned with Trump's executive orders on issues like climate change and diversity, equity, inclusion programs. But the pause sparked uncertainty in organizations that rely on trillions of dollars from Washington. And it left the White House scrambling to try to explain what would and would not be subject to the funding pause.
They're largely not surprised by these findings, believe more can be done to support both schools and students.
While classes are now back to normal, the lingering impact of learning loss during the pandemic is still being felt.
My daughter was one of those students who was learning online, but that's not how she best learns. So when she went back, of course, she probably had deficits, as did so many other students, but they didn't go back and say, okay, what didn't you get, so that we can continue to build on those skills.
In North Carolina, 58% of fourth graders and 65% of eighth graders have reading abilities at or above a basic level. Both figures marginally down from 2 years ago.
So it is something that we really need to invest in early in order to prevent reading challenges, because then we're also going to compound challenges learning science, challenges learning all of those other content areas.
The results are more promising in math, where fourth and eighth graders did see improvement in their skills compared to 2022, though still below pre-pandemic levels. While there are a number of different ideas on how to best address it, many roads lead back to school funding and the ongoing legal battle over the Leandro Education Plan.
With those resources, we can get more teachers, we can get more programs, we can have funding for buses for after school, sports. It's a lot of resources that aren't available right now within the school system, and that's the reason, because we're not fully funded.
A spokesperson for the Department of Public Instruction highlighted other metrics which did show improvement among the state's students, including a record number of high schoolers who completed advanced placement exams last year, as well as improvements in literacy assessment rates in kindergarten through third grade, dating back to the 2022-2023 school year.
State Superintendent Mo Green is expected to address those results during next week's State Board of Education meeting. In Raleigh, I'm Michael.
News reports have claimed that I'm anti-vaccine or anti-industry. I am neither. I am pro-safety.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is President Trump's nominee to lead the Health and Human Services Department. He's pretty controversial for some of the skepticism he has displayed in the past for vaccines in particular. RFK's confirmation looks poised to be pretty tight. He can lose no more than 3 Republicans. That's if no Democrats choose to vote for him. And a key figure in that has been independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, who has some overlap with Kennedy on questions around the influence of the pharmaceutical industry and the food supply. But Senator Sanders was asking some pretty intense questions that showed some combativeness today.
Now you're coming before this committee and you say you're pro-vaccine. Just want to ask some questions. And yet your organization is making money selling a child's product to parents for $26, which casts fundamental doubt on the usefulness of vaccines.
Democrats came armed into the hearing with many of his past statements.
Did you say that exposure to pesticides causes children to become transgender?
No, I never said that.
Okay, I have the record that I'll give to the chairman, and he can make his judgment about what you said.
He really pushed back. In some instances, he said they were taken out of context. In some instances, he denied that he said them. He was clear that he was not anti-vaccine. He specifically said he supports the measles and polio vaccines. For most Democrats, it seemed like this was too little too late.
I am extremely concerned that as secretary, you would be able to halt critical vaccine research and to exploit parents' natural worries by advising them not to vaccinate their children.
We've just had a measles case in Rhode Island, the first since 2013. And frankly, you frighten people.
There is some consensus that you see among Republicans, Democrats, and Kennedy that they'd like to take some processed food out of the American diet and that in general, they want to cut down on the kinds of chemical additives.
If you like a cheeseburger, a McDonald's cheeseburger, a Diet Coke, which my boss loves, and you should be able to get them.
That comment was a reference to a widely circulated photo of Kennedy eating McDonald's with Trump on Trump's plane. Previously, Kennedy was a Democrat, and in his 2024 presidential campaign, he expressed support for abortion rights. That's been an area that a lot of Republicans have wanted him to clarify where he is now.
I agree with President Trump that every abortion is a tragedy. I agree with him that we cannot be a moral nation if we have 1.2 million abortions a year.
He was asked repeatedly about the abortion pill.
President Trump has asked me to study the safety of mifepristone. He has not yet taken a stand on how to regulate it.
One exchange that lawmakers were talking about after the hearing is some questions that he got from Senator Bill Cassidy, a Louisiana Republican, about Medicare and Medicaid.
How do you propose that we integrate those programs? Does Medicare pay more, Medicare pay less, Medicaid pay more, Medicaid pay less? How do we do that?
Well, I'm not exactly sure because I'm not in there. I mean, it is difficult to integrate them.
Cassidy is a doctor by training. He's also the chairman of the Senate Health Committee, which has a hearing later this week on Kennedy, and he's seen as a pivotal vote in his confirmation process. Some Democrats felt that Kennedy hadn't shown enough mastery, that he knew enough about those two programs, which are a linchpin of the U.S. healthcare system.
I do not know the answer to that. I look forward to exploring options with you.
Kennedy has another hearing on Thursday in the Senate Health Committee, which does not have jurisdiction. That means that the Senate Finance Committee is the place where they will vote on whether to advance his nomination to the full Senate floor. If that occurs, it will be up to Republican leadership as to when they want to schedule his full Senate confirmation vote.
Мы, к сожалению, видим, что эти печальные данные подтверждаются. Там были и другие наши сограждане. Плохие новости сегодня из Вашингтона. Мы сожалеем и соболезнуем родным и близким, которые потеряли тех, кто из наших сограждан погиб в этой авиакатастрофе. Пока никаких планов по контактам на высшем уровне.
The number of polio cases is surging in Pakistan. The epicenter was once in the country's northwestern area bordering Afghanistan, but now the south reports many patients. NHK World's Nazar ul Islam has the story.
In the southern province of Sindh, 11-year-old Zakar Ali lives in a suburb of Sakhar facing the Indus River.
Do you want to go outside?
Last October, Zakar suddenly lost strength in his legs. After being examined at a hospital, he was diagnosed with polio.
He looks happy in this photo as he could walk around, but suddenly he became paralyzed, which was a shock for us.
His father says Zakar was vaccinated, but he is not sure if his son received a full dose, as vaccination records were washed away in the floods 3 years ago. Pakistan has poor sanitation conditions, and like Afghanistan, it has been unable to eradicate polio. 147 cases were reported in 2019, and since then, the number of cases had been declining. But last year, they suddenly jumped to 73. In 2021, the Taliban retook power in Afghanistan. Authorities believe that large numbers of people fleeing increased Islamist militant activity in Pakistan's northwest caused infections to surge. Health officials also point to the impact of the floods in 2022. Last September, they found poliovirus in the sewage of many major cities.
They lost their homes. There's been a food shortage after agricultural land was lost. They have reduced immunity. Sanitation is a big issue. Dirt has spread. That's led to all kinds of diseases in children. It's an alarming situation. Day by day, polio cases are on the rise.
Authorities are promoting polio vaccinations at bus terminals and train stations, but some residents deeply distrust vaccines, and recently that's been made worse by false information on social media. Islamic extremist groups and others are claiming polio vaccination is a Western plot to sterilize Muslims. To spread proper understanding of polio, health officials are working to raise awareness among residents with the help of local religious leaders.
I came to tell people that giving the polio drops to children is in line with Islamic law. There's nothing wrong with it.
My mind wasn't clear if it was good or not. That's why I came here by myself. I'll administer them to my children too.
People engaged in the fight against polio in Pakistan are struggling to dispel such distrust amid the country's lack of stability. Nazrul Islam, NHK World, Sindh Province.
At least 75 Rohingya refugees were not allowed to disembark on a tourist beach in western Indonesia. Now, the refugees had arrived by boat at a tourist beach. The Rohingya are heavily persecuted in Myanmar, and thousands risk their lives each year on long and dangerous sea journeys to reach Malaysia or Indonesia. Now, the latest group of refugees, including 4 children, arrived on a beach in the Aceh province. Security forces prevented the refugees from disembarking and ordered them to stay on board the boat. Military and police officers were deployed to monitor the beach, while local residents took photos of the boat and provided the refugees with food. Rohingya arrivals in Indonesia tend to follow a cynical pattern, slowing during the stormy winter months and picking back up when sea conditions calm down. More than 260 Rohingya refugees arrived on a beach earlier this month. More than 100 refugees were rescued after their boat sank off the coast of East Aceh in November last year. In October, 152 Rohingya refugees were brought ashore after being anchored for days off the coast of South Aceh district, while officials decided whether to let them land. Indonesia is not a signatory to the UN Refugee Convention and says it cannot be compelled to take in refugees from Myanmar, calling instead on neighboring countries to share the burden and resettle the Rohingyas who arrive on its shores.
Another hit from the recent fires for residents and businesses. Public health officials are now asking you to stay away from miles of beaches and the sand, all because of toxic runoff. KCAL News reporter Lori Perez live tonight in Santa Monica, where it's already being felt by businesses there. Lori?
Yeah, Susie, that's right. This is tough news for businesses, no doubt about it. It is, of course, already the low season here on the coast, so business is down. Then came the fires, and now business owners say this beach closure might be too much to bear.
I still think it's a beautiful time to come to the beach.
The manager of Perry's in Santa Monica is pleading for customers, saying the beach might be off limits, but the view isn't. Two Perry's locations north of the pier remain shuttered. Their other cafe and bike rental spots down the coast just reopened after 2 weeks. He says hours for workers are already being cut, and now with notice of the beach closures.
Between the rain, the cold weather and the fires, it's very terrible for our employees.
We still saw people on the sand and in the ocean today, even though public health officials have shut down the beaches from Malibu to Playa del Rey indefinitely, warning the recent fires and rain could have deposited toxic chemicals in the sand and water. A few blocks from the beach, Lula's general manager, Chuck Craig, says they're already ordering less product. Business is down 20% since the fires. The beaches being closed is gutting.
A lot of our guests bring families, and on the weekends, they'll go down to the beach and then they'll wander up here, and no one's going to be going to the beach. The hardest part is cutting back staff, rationing shifts.
Next door, Brian Borneman says his restaurant Crudo e Nudo is already feeling the loss of business from many customers who lost homes and of others who feel guilty or wary about going out. He says if all that plus the beach closure keeps even more people away, he expects to see layoffs in 6 to 8 weeks citywide.
Every time you spend money locally, you're supporting not just me and my business, you're supporting staff who lives here locally, who spends money locally, fishermen who live here locally and spend money locally. There's been enough setbacks, and people have felt like the air is toxic, now the water is toxic, and what isn't toxic is spending money in your neighborhood.
Now, here on the west side, it is especially difficult because business owners say a lot of their customers were people who lived in the Palisades or travelers who came down PCH from the north. And of course, they've lost both those bases.
Listening right now to WTTG, we're now taking over to show you this. This is video from the Kennedy Center camera. And you see that explosion right there. That is the moment when this small plane apparently crashed into a helicopter. You see a fireball, and then, Marla, we see that plane head down towards the Potomac River.
Oh, what an image there. And according to our sister station in D.C., WTTG, that in fact is confirmed that a small aircraft collided with a helicopter. They were hearing that it is not a D.C. police helicopter, and colleagues on the ground say that several people were saying that it was a military helicopter. That information is not confirmed, but according to our sister station in D.C., Fox 5 there, they have confirmed that it is a helicopter and a small aircraft that has collided. Again, this is courtesy of the Kennedy Center, the moment of impact.
We're turning around some audio tape that we now have in our possession, and it is, let me just read to you what I have here. It is between Pat 25 and DCA Tower. It's the air traffic controllers who are apparently in conversations with the two aircraft. as they are coming into this particular airspace. Obviously, Leland Vittert reported earlier to us that he learned that at the final approach, the American Airlines Flight 5342 was told to switch to a different runway, to runway 33, and the pilot said, we can do that. All right, we've got this audio. This is scanner audio of the air traffic controllers. So I'm just going to play it for you.
S25, CRJ in flight. S25, pass on is CRJ.
This club has an aircraft in flight for separation.
Separate. American 472, Washington Tower, 1 star, 32017. American 3130, go around turn left and 250, claim maintain 3000.
So again, that was audio between Pat 25, and I'm sorry I can't tell you what Pat 25 means, but the DCA tower I can certainly tell you. It's air traffic controllers, and I felt like I could discern some yelling in the background there.